in-depth race recaps.
He's shown speed, he's shown dominance at other racetracks.
Pit stops and strategy.
Hell yeah, boys. Let's go. Race strategy, man.
Fantasy racing insights.
Talk about being a team in the summer. We did it. Good job, boys.
Your weekly home for everything Ryan Blaney and Team 12.
Good job, Timmy. Here's the many more, fellas. Thank you.
This is the Team Blaney podcast.
Let's go race for a championship.
Welcome, everyone, to another live pre-race, I'll call it a chat, here on our Team Blaney social media channels. We're going to talk about the race today, upcoming at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and a little bit about how Ryan Blaney's weekend has gone so far. And I don't know about you, Steve, but I have like this just overwhelming sense of like deja vu.
I'm excited. I'm pumped. We got them all right where we want them.
Yeah, it's just
you know, NASCAR Cup every day, and they go to drop the green flag. You got them all right where you want them, right where you can see all the squirrely little buggers out there in front of you. Take them down one at a time.
And I would agree. I'm still optimistic about today's race, but the deja vu, it's just eerily similar to what happened in the fall at Las Vegas. The one thing that they can do is try to have a much better race than they had in the fall, because very similar circumstances. They go out and practice, they run some laps, and they crash. I think that was a much more significant situation as far as the crash damage was. In this weekend's case, they were able to kind of just fix the rear clip up and re-letter the car and get back out there and going. But he will be starting at the tail end of the field. And for those of you that are streaming on Max with the in-car cameras, it's going to be a fun race to watch and see how they can move up through the field. And hopefully they aren't involved and barely clipped in a freak accident that saw a car flip over last year in the race. So,
yeah, this what's funny is like right away I thought, just get the backup car out, because I guess the new vehicle damage policy says that if they go to the garage during a practice and start fixing things, they're not allowed to qualify anyway. So I thought, well, you know what? Then just get the backup up and prep it. But they start working on the car. And then I went back and on, if you use the NASCAR website, the app is cool, but on the website, they show you some different breakdowns of practice. And you can literally go in and hit individual lap times, right? And this is something I decided to do real quick. And I'm like, okay. Now, what it does with the individual lap times is I've got him starred as one of my favorites. So he's at the top of the screen. And then it kind of goes down the list of like the top individual laps, like let's say his practice, Bubba Wallace was number 1 or whatever, right? But then you switch over to where it says individual lap times, and it shows how everybody's 13th lap was, how everybody's 14th lap was, how everybody's 15th lap was, right? And in a range there of like between 10 and 15, his lap times were all in a, where I have it written down here, 29.61 to 29.69 range for like 5-6 laps in a row. And late into the run, too, we're talking lap 10 through 15. And you looked and compared it to everybody else on their 10th through 15th lap. And even the fastest guy was 0.4 a lap slower than the laps Ryan was running at that point, which once again tells you that it's going to be a long run car, that if they do anything that's over 10 laps, 15 laps in this race, they'll be gaining on guys and passing guys left and right. And it's another good reason why you fix the car, right? Because this car's already got that together. It's already got that set up, that telemetry. The other thing about it is I also looked at the overall lap average, which is kind of cool too. The overall lap average, he was second best at one point for overall lap average, which is just crazy when you think about it. He only ran 18 laps. So maybe he didn't run a long enough run to have it fall off too much, but his individual lap time wasn't that great. So he was consistent in lap time where it didn't drop. So that was really kind of a cool thing to look at too. So good reason to fix the car at least and get it ready for the weekend, for Sunday.
What did you think about the scenario that put them into this position in the first place? Because I was listening to it on the radio. We were on the road coming back home, And initially, the radio folks were like, "Oh, it's super windy. It's blowing stuff all around the track. He probably ran over something." Post crash, we saw some views of the tire where basically the tire just split at the sidewall, which typically means more of a setup, air pressure, whatever kind of a situation. And they interviewed crew chief Jonathan Hassler, and they asked him what he and Goodyear talked about, and because they looked over the tire and everything, and Jonathan basically said, "Well, our setup parameters didn't help things," is really what he said. And my first instinct to you was to say, going back to 2022, a lot of teams learned this lesson. It took a few races of it happening, but they learned a lesson not to push the limits. And I was more on the let's be conservative side. You were bringing me the facts of the lap times and fall off and things like that, and it seemed like you were more on the why not let's try and push the limits to try to get the most speed as we possibly can. That's at least where I feel. We didn't talk about it extensively, but I felt like you landed in that camp a little bit.
It's interesting that the TV guy bump early on in the run when the pressure was low, and it doesn't damage it right away. And then after a while of the pressure building, that damage then comes to fruition. And I think that's what happened, but there must be a really aggressive setup to begin with, because nobody else seemed to have that problem yesterday, that I recall. And, the worst part is that they do hit the fence, and it doesn't look like on TV, it doesn't look like much of a hit. But I'm listening to, of course, in-car audio during the practice, and man, it sounded like, Ryan sounded like the wind got knocked out of him, and it just seemed like, and then they show the damage, and it was more damage than what it looked like when it hit the wall. But it's kind of like you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't, as far as like what to do with the air, air pressure and aggressiveness, and they got to push the envelope a little bit. Better to do what, like you said about last year happening when it happened last year. Better to do it now than later in the year, I guess, too. If there's any lessons that were actually learned, but you never know too, because in Ryan's interview, I think for TV after he come back from the Infield Care Center, he said that he doesn't know yet. Now at that point, he hadn't really talked to the team yet either, but we don't know. Maybe the tire got cut. Maybe he ran them. An hour or two later that happened. So that's really kind of hard to say. I'm sure they've studied the data, but for the lap times to not fall off for that long a period of time, seems to me like the tires were operating pretty well, as the pressure was building.
One interesting thing that came out of this, and thanks to our contributor on the ground out there in Las Vegas this weekend, our friend Deborah, who flies over to the U.S. A couple of times a year on holiday, from Amsterdam, and she was on the scene in the Neon Garage during practice, and got some great photos, great video that we shared of the team assessing the damage, removing the bad body parts, putting on the new parts, working on underneath the car. And one of the cool thing that a lot of our followers on all our different channels kind of noted was that, Ryan stuck around in the garage during like this whole process, wrench in hand, trying to help with what he could, getting under the car. I even saw Travis Geisler, who's kind of one of the more, managers or executives at Team Penske, under the car himself, repairing things too. Part of this is because practice was actively going on, so they couldn't just pull the teams together to get a head start. So kind of whoever could jump in and help was doing it. So I thought that was pretty cool to see. And people pointed out Ryan working on it was nice to see the driver popping in and lending his hand when he can.
That's going to say the video that she let me borrow the video, and I made a TikTok out of people commenting right away. And one of the first comments somebody said was, "That's a real race car driver right there. Works on his own stuff," And I thought the same thing. It's really, really cool to see him, and that video is really cool because he's like basically laying on his back on the ground, and Raymond Fox III is actually in front of him there, screwing things together, on that wheel well, so or wheel opening there. So yeah, it was a really cool video. I'm glad she let me share it too, because that's kind of cool. She had, if you follow her on like Instagram, something like that, in the next couple of days, I think there's gonna be a ton of great pictures, because I guess she takes a lot of stuff with a camera and then has to download it to her phone or computer. So yes. Yeah. It's live TV.
Yeah.
I don't know why she's
made an appearance before.
Yeah. Hey, come here. Come here. Maybe she'll make an appearance. Everybody loves a good puppy dog.
But yeah, thanks again to Deborah, who allowed us to share that stuff from and a couple of folks asked too, like, oh, is that the view from the Neon Garage? Which I haven't been. I know you've been to Las Vegas itself, but I haven't been to the track.
Yeah, I don't know the track.
You've been to the track yet either, but the Neon Garage was one of those first ones that came up where they specifically kind of redesigned the infield of the track to make it really more welcoming to fans, and you can get a view there. Much like you can at Talladega and some other places of the garage. So there you go. There's Blaney.
Sorry,
Happy
I
now.
set the alarm off. Sorry about that. Okay.
I guess she had to just know what was going on, I guess.
Oh. And shout out to my dad if he's still watching. Hi.
Good stuff. That's live TV for you.
So you talked about speed, and
Yeah.
part of the reason why I'm optimistic about the day is the fact that outside of both races in 2022 where he had incidents, and this race in 2024, the fall race that I mentioned, where there was a massive crash, and Ryan got clipped at the last second by the sixth car that was kind of spinning out from the infield and got involved in that during the playoffs last year. Outside of those incidents, 1, 2, 4, and then one in 2019, where he would also finished a lap down. He hasn't finished outside of the top 15 without incident since his first race in 2015.
Yeah.
So that's kind of insane. His last several finishes there, going back, we'll do with the next gen car, 36th, 28th. He was involved in incidents in both of those. 13th, 6th, 3rd, and 32nd in that fall race. He did lead four laps in that fall race before getting taken out in that crash. Average start of 13.1, average finish of 12.6, 6 top 5s, 10 top 10s at Las Vegas. They come there with speed all the time. I think it's an opportunity for them to show that very early in this stage, and this is when we might want to do our over under. How many positions is he going to gain in stage 1? It'd be amazing if he was able to come all the way through the field and get stage points. I don't expect that.
Yeah.
It also depends on what happens. If there are any cautions or anything like that in this first stage. I do expect them to get stage points in stage 2.
That's what I was going to say. The beginning of the stage is the key, like getting around all the all the squirrels that are going to be in front of them there, and it's only 36 cars in the race, and so that means you got to pass 26 of them to get to that top 10, and just it depends on like really literally what line he is at the restart, and when he decides to stuff it 3 wide going into 1, and how many guys check up or get around or. And for the most part, I think I could see him close to that top 10 by the end of the stage. If it sorts out and they get just clicking off laps, I can definitely see him picking off guys as they sort each other out, because the top guys too will all kind of like make will kind of sort themselves out too. And I the pole sitter. I don't expect to see him. I don't even know if he'll be in the top 10 by the end of the first stage, to tell you the truth.
The Fire cars have had a lot of speed, but only one of them came with speed in qualifying this week. The other two, I think, were 20 plus back. But I think you've seen even when he was in the 34 last year with that same crew chief, sometimes they really trim the car out and give up a little bit on handling. So they might fade early, and then work on the car to get it back into race handling condition. And I think that car is capable of a top 15. But
Yeah.
not early on. I think he might fade.
The only thing that really, really hurts about yesterday is when you look how the other two Penske cars and the Wood Brothers car qualified. You look at how they qualified and you go, oh man, what could have been, for the starting position. But like on the other hand, I mean, this basically the way these guys operate. I guarantee you, as soon as it all happened and they decided they were going to fix it, that's it. That was the focus. Let's just fix it. Let's get it ready. Let's make sure it's right. And then we're going to work on tomorrow when tomorrow comes. And, they don't worry themselves about all that other stuff. They just worry about what they have to do.
So one of the things that we did the last time we did one of these lives is you went over what your fantasy live lineup was going to be for the weekend, and maybe we'll do our 36 for 36 picks first.
Yeah.
Who'd you
okay,
that thing?
So far this year, I've used Joey, Kyle. I used Shane at Coda, and I used Ryan last week.
Same.
But so we're done using Ryan. And these 36 for 36. Anybody that has seen it and didn't understand what it is, you only get to pick a guy once, and however he scores that day, it adds to your score. So today I went with Kyle Larson. This is one of those races that'll be Kyle Larson stage points, I'm sure. And if he doesn't mess something up coming to, through one of the stages, it'll probably be a big points day for Kyle. So I went with Kyle Larson as my pick this week.
That's funny. Yeah, we've been on the same wavelength the last couple of weeks. So I've used Brad, I've used Joey, I've used Austin, and I've used Ryan last week. So I'm through the main three Penske guys. So I still have Josh Perry to use at some point if we're going somewhere where Penske brings some speed. And I also yesterday locked in my Kyle Larson pick. He's a 3-time winner at Las Vegas. This is like the typical kind of race he would win. They would win early on in the season, and honestly, he could even start his own streak, potentially starting here. So I used Ryan last week, and I plan to use Larson today. My overall ranking I've 88 points earned. I'm 13,556 overall. I don't know where you were at, but I feel like I was a little bit higher.
Okay. Overall points. How many overall points?
I have 88.
Okay, 112. And my overall rank is 7,256.
That's not bad.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, this is one of those things where it's a marathon. You got to pick a guy like Larry, and you're gonna have to pick. You have to pick somebody from some of these different teams that are just kind of down the line at some point and hope they have a good weekend too. So, Rick Ware Racing at some point, you have to pick a guy, and it's like
that's a good point.
Maybe Corey LaJoie at a super speedway. Maybe you get lucky with something like that and get good points, but otherwise, it's scary. You got to pick the right guy at the right week to really maximize points.
Fantasy lineup wise, let me go through my starting lineup. I have Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson, Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, Ross Chastain, and I have Joey Logano in the garage right now. For the featured matchups, I picked Reddick over Briscoe, Bell over Logano, Kyle Busch over Ross Chastain, even though I have him as a starter, and Bowman over Noah Gragson. What's your thought process for this week?
All right, so here's an interesting thing. The garage thing is like one of those ones. I want to put somebody in the garage who I think, in case something happens and that kind of thing. So I actually put Ryan in the garage to start the race. But once again, if he can get to the top 10 by the end of the first stage, I may just put him in the lineup. And I've really gotten better. The reason I'm doing a little better this year is I've really gotten better at right before the end of the second stage checking where everybody is and how many stage points they've gotten. Because even if a guy crashes out in that third stage, if he had good stage points in the first two stages, he might still have a decent day, I got Logano. He's starting up front and should score a lot of points early on. Larson, Bell. You can't go against Bell right now. Then I went Chase Elliott and William Byron in the lineup, but it's kind of like a Hendrick thing that I just kind of feel just like you have Bowman there. I mean, I kind of feel like they're all going to be up in the top 10 a good portion of the day. So for the individual matchup picks, Tyler Reddick over Briscoe, Logano over Bell. I think Logano will have a better day than Christopher at least by the end of the race. Chastain over Kyle Busch. Everybody really wants Kyle Busch to do so well, and they're thinking that he's going to be the guy, and he's the flagship of that program now. I don't see it. I mean, I see glimmers of what he used to be, but I don't think the equipment is up to what he needs it to be for him to drive the way he drives, you know. Then I got Bowman over Gregson. Those guys, you know, that program over there, the 38, the 4, and 34, they were making some gains last year, but I don't know, you know, and especially dirt driver. So that's kind of why I can't match up.
Yeah, I think Zane squeaked into the top 10 last week. Maybe Noah has run up at the front during parts of the race, but he's just also super aggressive and has got caught up in some incidents along the way this year as well. So, yeah, I'm not sure, especially with McDowell exiting that program. I don't know how much influence he had on everything over there. So they're going with that super young lineup, kind of like Hendrick Motorsports did a few years ago. It's really paid off for them. But yeah, totally different scenario at Front Row Motorsports. So let's take a look at the top 10 starters for today's race. You mentioned McDowell is on the pole. Interesting for him in that crew chief pairing to get a pole at a track like this and not at super speedway or a road course or something like that, like they maybe have in the past. Logano starting second, Cindric is third, Kyle Busch is fourth. That's also why I think a lot of people are high on Kyle Busch right now. He did have the qualifying speed, but we'll see how that plays out in the race. Eric Jones, good qualifying effort for him in fifth, Bowman sixth, Barry seventh. So as you said, 3 of the Penske in-house cars plus the affiliated car all in the top 10. So Ryan probably would have had close to that speed.
Yeah.
8th, William Byron, Zane Smith in 9th. So a little bit of that front row speed showing up. Larson is 10th. And as we said, Ryan Blaney will start shotgun on the field, 36th position, did not get out there for qualifying. I haven't taken a look at what his pit selection is. I know at least I believe this pit road's a little bit wider. The boxes are a little bit bigger, so that's beneficial. But you just never know when you pick that late. I think they it
was
basically end up selecting it for you, essentially.
Yeah, I had it. Somebody posted it on the Discord chat, actually. Where was he at? Noah posted it on Discord. He is 29th box, so that's before you get to the start finish line. He's got the 16 in front of him and the 9 behind him. So it could be an interesting day depending on how he runs in and around the 9. If he's in front of the 9 coming to pit road, that's great. If he's behind the 9, it's going to make it a little more difficult. They might play some games there between the two teams. The 16 is a wild card because they might do they'll do some strategy things that may put them in a different pit cycle to begin with. So,
but yeah, there is a chance that first cycle it might be a little rough, especially if there's an early caution. There's a chance that the 16 and 9 will be ahead of him, and he's going to be coming in at a kind of an awful spot to be in. So, but hopefully that doesn't last too long, and he can get around those guys by the midway portion of the race would be ideal. What did you think of the other 2 races of the weekend? The Truck Series race on Friday, the Xfinity Series race on Saturday, and man, the Truck Series races at Las Vegas, especially the restarts and probably 5 or 6 laps after, are insane. Like they spread out real big on the restarts, but the runs these guys can get when 2 trucks in front of you get side by side, the third person coming in line with a run, it's just like they're shot out of a cannon. And those guys actually did. I mean, they have a streak going of green flag finishes. That's they're getting near the record. But those guys, with as loose as those trucks looked, as big as the runs were, really held things together. And honestly, just shout out to that series this year. They've definitely in years past have been rough, aggressive, tons of cautions, feel like the drivers this year are a little bit more level-headed, at least so far.
I don't know what it is, but they really are running well near the end of races where they're not somebody's not having an accident and just the guys like Frankie Muniz are being, staying out of the way of people and, just doing racing their race themselves. So, yeah, they've went on a tear of having these great finishes and not having to go green, white checker and crash 6 times and things like that. So it's made the racing respectable. It was great. I listened to Grant on the radio because I want to hear Tim, and they ran a good race and got themselves up there. And Josh's guy was up near the front. Riggs was up near the front most of the night too. Got there at the end, almost made some moves. So yeah, it's great there's like about 10 names that you're going to see every week in that series, and it seems like they're all racing each other pretty well and not hitting each other and bouncing off each other.
The
Friday was pretty good.
Series race ended up being pretty exciting as well. Not necessarily a ton of carnage or anything. And I thought, Justin Allgaier, like a masterclass at the end of just nerves and staying, like not getting, over his head or feeling the footsteps. Like I thought for sure. I think I texted you with like 15 to go, like, oh, here comes another heartbreaker for the 7. That was pretty good drive for him.
Yeah, it was a great drive. That reminded me a lot of seeing Ryan do that once or twice where you hold a guy off for 10 or 12 laps at the end of a race. And it really reminded me of those situations. He did a great job of just blocking any kind of run that he could get coming off the corners and making him have to go places he didn't want to go to try and get around him. And basically after 10 or 15 laps of that, he couldn't get there because he had used his stuff up, to get there, to get that far. So, yeah, that was great. And listening to, I made mention of Ryan Sieg last week on the podcast, listening to him, he had a car that was probably a top 5 car, except he couldn't shift into third gear. And they had to work around a lot of things to get him into position. And then he ends up finishing top 10. So, listening to Tim with those guys, Tim is having so much experience on the spotter stand is incredible because at one point they start talking about green flag pit cycles and what they're going to do. And then they talk about the restarts and what they're going to do. And Tim says, well, why don't we just start in third gear? Start in third gear and then not have to try to shift into third gear. And then they did that on the next restart. And instead of losing 10 places, they only lost 1 or 2, so that's why I love listening to Tim on Sundays, some of those things, and Josh was the same way too. When Josh was spotting for Ryan, Josh had a lot of insight into how the car was operating coming in and out of the turns and whether it was loose or tight or how they could correct things. So just something to look forward today if you're listening on HBO Max.
Yeah, great run for the Sieg team overall. His brother Kyle finished in the top 15 or really close to the top 10. I think he finished 11.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to you, I think on, that team for the most part in years past has picked out certain tracks that they think they can really run well at, kind of with sponsorship dollars and their budget kind of upped the support that they get for certain races. And it looks like they had that for both those cars and they ran, great all day. Shout out to, you mentioned Josh Williams, Ryan's old spotter who's spotting for Connor Zilich. And, people have already said that this kid's a phenom. He made a mistake and sped on pit road and kind of threw his day off, but that kid drove right to the front, right to the lead, around veteran guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned before that I thought maybe he was a couple years away from getting the Cup, but if he keeps running like this in the Xfinity Series, he's already picked up a couple of wins in just less than a year. I think really racing in the series.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be tough to keep him away from a Cup car. He's going to have to bounce some people at track out.
Well, they knew that he was a really good road course racer. They knew that part of it. And I think this year basically is let's see what he does with an oval. And when he does things like he did yesterday out there, he shows that he can handle a car on an oval. His next test will be what he does in a Cup car on an oval. You know what I mean? So they're not wasting much time with them. That's for sure. It's great to see Red Bull at the track too. I know it's on the on Shane's car today, I think. So that's kind of cool to see today.
So we mentioned Ryan's kind of difficulties this weekend. He's run really well this year. He's gotten caught up in a couple of incidents. Got caught up last week running really well, engine issues. So I've already heard a lot of that luck factor coming in. The comments in a lot of our posts, like, here we go again with that bad luck. The only thing I will say, this is a great stretch of races that's coming up for the 12 team. If they can get a solid finish today at Las Vegas, obviously that's ideal. They got Homestead coming up next week, where huge heartbreak in the fall. Finished second to Tyler Reddick, lost the race coming out of turn 4, and then they head to Martinsville, where he runs really well, not mostly in the fall. He's run really well there in general, almost like Phoenix. But unlike Phoenix and Martinsville, he's ended up going to victory lane twice in the past 2 years, again in the fall race. So this is an opportunity for them to maybe check off that box of winning a race there in the spring. But there's still, I feel like, a lot of momentum, but it really keys on what happens in today's race. So what are your expectations? You were a lot more optimistic in me in what he could do in stage 1. You said you think if everything falls right, he could end up in the top 10 by the end of this stage. I'm hoping he ends up at least into the top 15, and then sets up a good stage points run for the second stage, and then hopefully, top 10 or better on the day. I think with their speed and the speed Penske kind of showed in practice and qualifying, they should make their way to top 5. I mean, this is a championship contending team, regardless of where they finish the last few weeks. So you're always optimistic. Where's your bar at for today?
That's right. We got them all right where we want them, right in front of us. We can see them all. See them all get squirrely right in front of us. But that's once again, the first 10, 15 laps of just getting around those guys that are not performing. The cars aren't going to perform as well as his car does. That's the key. He gets around some of those guys early on in the first 4 or 5 laps and gets himself into the top 20 pretty quickly. Yeah, it all depends on if the stage stays green the whole time too. That's the other thing we forget sometimes there's a caution and it just jumbles everything up, especially if it comes near the end of the stage and people give up stage points for track position later, things like that. So I just, if it's a clean green stage, I can see them all the way getting real close. I say top 10, I mean 10, right at the back end of the top 10, but right there. So yeah, hopefully it just stays green, and hopefully he stays. If it doesn't stay green, hopefully he's not in the middle of anybody else's mess. That's the only, that's something you always like to point out. When you're back there, that's what could happen. Be part of somebody else's problems, and we don't want that. Yeah, and people have that's not a conspiracy theorist, but people with this paint scheme talk about this Shell Pennzoil paint scheme and how it's been cursed. I will mention, yes, for the most part, it's been cursed, but in 2 occasions, he's won in a version of this paint scheme. Now, the number was centered on the door back then. He's won at the Roval in this paint scheme. He won during his championship season at Talladega in this paint scheme. That's right. Has had a decent amount of struggles beyond that in this paint scheme, including, I think even that race last year. So I don't buy into all of that stuff. I do kind of, I don't know, but we'll see. I will say there have been flashes of brilliance. Maybe today might be another one of those flashes of brilliance, and it'd be great to go to victory lane today in this kind of, when you think about other teams or other drivers, when you think about like Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, even in some occasions where they face adversity like this and they've gone to victory lane after. Both teams faced a lot of adversity like this and come out with great finishes, top 5 finishes. It'd be nice to have one of these starts 36 because they crashed in practice. They pieced it back together with the help of the driver, wrenching under the car, during qualifying to get it back out there for the race today, and ends up in victory lane. That'd be a nice story for us to tell tomorrow night when we return live here on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube as we record our live weekly in-depth race recap podcast. So I think everybody should join us here again tomorrow evening, and we'll tell you how things shook out and any of the strategies that were involved, any of the incidents that occurred,
and just how many passes Ryan made throughout the day.
That's the fun part. I gotta get make sure I got extra pens ready to go for taking notes, because he's gonna, that first couple laps, it's gonna be just what was that one, number what? Yeah. luckily the in-car camera helped with that. Oh, and this week's in-car camera is, again, from what I saw yesterday, is the network has it, so there might be multiple angles, and unfortunately, the only thing about that's bad is you're at the mercy of the director for Fox. So if he decides he wants to show this thing or that thing, he might. Although it was good on the one pit stop last week, because he showed them out the side window, then the top of the car, then on the other side of the window. It showed the guys around the front of the car. But if you're watching on Max, you're going to get, the director's cut. And the thing that's good about it is, when they do have this camera, instead of the camera being inside the front windshield on that right-hand side of the car, it's actually up on top of the car for a good portion of the race too, which makes the view a little bit better, especially from the peripheral version of it. So yeah, definitely a good week to watch on the in-car camera going through the field here at the beginning of this race.
One other thing to mention that's not race related, but I think we're going to wrap this show up here in a few minutes. Leah Reeves from the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation sat down with us for an interview this past week that we're going to release soon, probably sometime this week, if not over next weekend. She kind of catches us up on everything that's happening with the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation. One thing that she pointed out to us during that show was the fact that the foundation each week on race day has been doing like a 12% off sale on certain merchandise on the Ryan Blaney Family Foundation website. This week, it's a Memory Matters t-shirt, which is kind of a big kind of core mission of theirs when it comes to brain health and memory and Alzheimer's. So their kind of cool Memory Matters shirt is the featured item this week. Today, you can get 12% off if you go to rbff10.org or ryanblaneyfamilyfoundation.org if you want to spell it all out, and go to their merchandise section, and you can get 12% off today with that sale. And from what I understand, they're going to be trying to do that throughout the year on race day, where you can save 12% on one of their unique merchandise items. So looking forward to that interview to come soon, and we'll get that out for you folks. The other thing that I mentioned, and our friend Chelsea reminded me of this, was she was saying, hope everybody is safe from the storms. There's some, massive storms that came across the Midwest, and it's moving its way currently right now over the East Coast. I know there was some damages and some deaths, and send our thoughts and prayers out to anybody impacted by those storms. Hope you're safe and sound. And they are just about to that line is just about to hit us here in Florida right now. I think we're going to be okay. I know you mentioned up there in Ohio, you're in the midst of a tornado watch as well, just like we are. So hopefully everybody on the East Coast stays safe, because a lot of folks are going to be experiencing those storms just as the race hits today. So thanks, Chelsea, for bringing that up.
Yeah. Hurry up. When you're done here, hurry up and go turn the TV on, see Morgan Freeman do the
that's right, the command. So
yeah. Tell us how good that's.
So we'll hop out of here. Thanks for joining us for our little impromptu Team Blaney pre-race chat. Tune in tomorrow night around 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to record our weekly in-depth race recap podcast, the Team Blaney podcast that you know and love. 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can watch it right here live on TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube, and then you can download it the next day, the audio version, and listen to it on your favorite podcast app. But for now, I'm Adam Rogers. He's Steve Mez. We'll catch you tomorrow when we do the live show. And good luck, Team 12. # Revenge of the 12.